Hi, I'm Mike Cohen, and welcome back to another Tap into Westfield podcast. Today we have back on the show David Wroe from the New Jersey Festival Orchestra. Welcome back to the show, David.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. It's a real pleasure to be here again. I remember we had a stimulating and enjoyable conversation last time.
Oh, yes, definitely. So, what's been happening over the year? You had a good year this year
I'm blessed to have had a great year in so many different ways. I've done quite a lot of traveling with my work. I think you know that I'm an orchestral conductor, and in addition to being music director of the New Jersey Festival Orchestra, I also travel as an independent conductor to visit orchestras literally all over the world. This year, it's taken me to South Korea, France a number of times, and I'll be going to China later in this year. So, a bit of travel, excuse me. I have two children with my wife, Sebastian and Tristan, and they are also budding musicians, but also, I think as we mentioned last year, really fine tennis players, and their development is progressing very satisfactorily. They're winning USTA tournaments, and they're keenly competitive athletes. So, and then finally, the New Jersey Festival Orchestra is celebrating now its 35th season and going strong. And it's an honor for me to work with the company and also to lead its initiatives in serving the community at large.
And what exactly is your role with the New Jersey? It's Westfield-based New Jersey Festival Orchestra?
Well, not quite anymore. It used to be the Westfield Symphony Orchestra for 30 years. But in the last, about 5 years ago, it had launched a major initiative to become more regional. And one of the strategic business decisions we took to make that happen was to fuse, if you like, or merge with some other professional orchestras that were serving other communities, primarily Morristown. In doing that, we changed our name from the Westfield Symphony Orchestra, which was a purely local institution, to the New Jersey Festival Orchestra, which is truly a regional institution now, which serves indeed Westfield and the greater Union County area, and indeed our offices are in Westfield. But now most of the concerts that we perform in Westfield, we also play elsewhere, primarily in Morris County at Drew University or at the Mayo Performing Arts Center. And then once in a while we reach further afield, both north into Bergen County and south. We've performed at the PNC Arts Center numerous times, Monroe Township, at Marasco Center in Basking Ridge, and even further afield of that, down in Princeton and Trenton. So we've metamorphosed, if you like, from a purely local dynamic organization serving Westfield to now a more broad-based regional organization called the New Jersey Festival Orchestra. And I am their music director, so I'm responsible for their music programs.
So I was just going to ask you, we're thinking along the same lines. What is your role as the music director?
Okay, well, as I mentioned, I am charged with the health, the design, and the implementation of the artistic mission of the company. And that manifests itself in a number of ways. We are the second or third largest professional symphony in the state, and that means that our musicians are fully professional, and we present professional orchestral, operatic, pops programs to our various constituents. So we give concerts, and we give a concert probably about every month, primarily again either in Westfield or in Morris County area, Morristown. But then, and before I continue with other aspects of our mission, the nature of our concerts are, as I mentioned, either symphonic or operatic. However, within those two major areas of the fine arts, there are diverse offerings. And so we offer more traditional classical music, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Mozart, Stravinsky, Mahler. We also offer more a lighter fare, modeled perhaps on the famed Boston Pops and Arthur Fiedler, where we mix lighter classical fare with Broadway music, with contemporary music. And then indeed, we do purely Broadway presentations as well. For example, one of our most popular programs is a New Year's Eve celebration where we pack over 1,000 people into the Westfield High School, and I hire 4 Broadway stars from various shows happening at any moment on Broadway, and we do a retrospective of the golden age of Broadway. So then I mentioned we also do choral works. We work with local choirs. We perform operas. In fact, coming up, our next performance coming up on March the 3rd and 4th is a fully staged, fully professional rendition of Madame Butterfly, arguably the most famous of all the operas. And that takes a good 2 weeks for us to prepare, put up on its legs and perform. So the nature of our concerts are quite diverse. However, and of course I conduct most of those programs, and I design them and implement them and serve in an ambassadorial role in getting the word out to the wider community that we're doing these things. However, I'm sorry, yes, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I had the very excellent opportunity last year to watch your concert in May, and it was really, you turned me into a fan of that type of music. It was really great. Not only did I enjoy the music, but watching you was really cool. It was like a mesmerizing performance. You're sweating and really into it. It's just, you know, really fun to watch somebody get into their craft such as you did.
Well, that's kind of you to say. My role is twofold. One, to be a sort of a traffic cop, in that, as you saw at the concert, and anyone will see if going to orchestral concerts, there's a lot of people on stage, maybe up to 50, 60, 70. And all that energy needs to be galvanized. And that is done by a conductor, of course. If there wasn't a conductor there, you'd have 70 different opinions of how the music goes. And music is such a personal and intimate language. Everyone has their own emotions and reaction to a piece of music. It's rarely the same. So you need a conductor to galvanize into a single message for the audience to listen to these disparate forces. And that's what you witnessed. And it takes a lot of energy to do that.
And can you tell us about the concert that I saw last year?
Well, actually, I'm trying to remember what was on that program.
It was when you had the celloist.
Oh, yes.
It was classical.
It was. We played a piece by Tchaikovsky called the Rococo Variations.
Yes.
But that was a special concert because the whole orchestra joined together with a kind of a local gal done good.
Yes.
Sophia Balazar, I think her name was, who was born in Martinsville, New Jersey, but then had launched upon a wonderful career that had taken her to Europe, and she was presently living in Berlin, working there as a soloist, and it was just such a pleasure to bring her back home and demonstrate what New Jersey, the quality that New Jersey can provide. So yes, we did that wonderful symphony. I think a wonderful concerto for cello and orchestra, and I think we also performed a big symphonic work in the second half as well.
Yes.
So that was particularly dynamic.
Well, the question I have for you after watching that, where does that passion for music come from? I mean, I've seen a lot of athletes. I've been to movies, obviously, and plays. And your passion for your craft is up there with any of them.
Well, I think I was blessed in that at an early age, I found something which was, well, for want of a better word, addictive. I remember at age 8, 9, being hooked to my record player, as it was in those days, and wearing down almost flat my LPs of Tchaikovsky symphonies and Beethoven symphonies, just lying on the floor and listening for hours and hours to this music. And so it became a passion for me that moved me. And I had almost a physical, visceral response to music at a very, very early age. And so I think my parents recognized that and encouraged it. So this passion has been there for a long time. And so when I was in my teens, it was just I never questioned or thought I would do anything other than be bathed and involved in this art form which moved me so dynamically. So I think my mind was made up very early that this is what I was going to do with my life.
And your parents, did they encourage, what did your parents do? Did they encourage you to do this?
They did. They were not in music. My father was a medical representative for Beecham's research laboratories, and my mother was a nurse and then a teacher. But they also had a love for music, and they insisted at first, I'm the youngest of 4 brothers, and they insisted that we all do music. In fact, they formed a string quartet with us 4. I was the only one, I think, that had such a dynamic passion for it, and they supported that fully.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in England. This is not a Texas accent, is it? I'm English, and I was born in northern England in a county called Yorkshire, famous for its puddings. But at a relatively early age, I was plucked out of that relatively normal upbringing to attend an English boarding school. Now, I can't remember, we talked about this last year, but when I say a boarding school, I don't mean dropped off at school on Monday and picked up on Friday. I mean dropped off at school on September the 4th and picked up December the 25th. And then having 3 weeks at home, and then going back to school, living there until the summer. So basically, and that started at age 10. So, you know, you can imagine, I have 2 children. I remember when they were 10, you had a couple of kids.
Yes.
I can't, and I'm sure you can't imagine in any circumstances giving up your children at age 10. But indeed, that essentially happened to me. And it was tough. I think it was tough for my parents. But it gave me an unprecedented musical education, because the boarding schools that I went to were music schools, and it exposed me to an intensity of study that was just not achievable in a regular day school.
And is that why they sent you to that school?
It is. I was average academically, but I did have this one gift that God gave me, I guess, and there was nothing to do with me, in that I had a beautiful boy soprano voice. We call it a treble voice, and I would open my mouth, and this golden, angelic sound would come from it, and it was like a phenomenon, and that got me all sorts of scholarships at very, very fine music schools. All well and good, of course, until my voice broke, and then it disappeared, and I can't sing to save my own life now. But that was the opportunity to get me into these music schools, and from there I studied cello and piano and all the other disciplines to help me become ultimately a music director. But it was a natural talent, which has nothing to do with my intellect, that got me started, which was a beautiful boy singing voice. And I was recorded in England. I was recorded on radio and dragged all around the various communities that I was living in to show off this talent.
But then you had to work hard to become what you are today.
Indeed. Once got into the teens and into the early 20s, being a professional musician is incredibly hard. And it's funny, offline, you and I were talking about our children in tennis. And actually the preparation for tennis, to be a great tennis player and a great musician, are not dissimilar. the bottom line is repetition. In terms with tennis, repetition and volume, meaning repetition in terms of drilling the technique that you're trying to learn, and then volume, meaning getting out the court and playing as many hours as possible to implement what you have learned. In music, it is exactly the same. You need to have a solid technique to express yourself, and then you need to put in hours and hours and hours every week to be able to master that technique to express the music you're playing. So I have applied those techniques that I've learned as a musician, and I now apply them to my son's tennis.
Those are probably techniques that will, and probably getting good at anything, writing, doing podcasts, anything. The more you know, it's a practice. Things are
Practice makes perfect.
Yes,
Absolutely, absolutely. You cannot escape putting in the time and effort to get good at anything. Again, not to use the tennis analogy, but there are other relationships in that to be a musician, really to hone your skill, it's something you have to do on your own. It's you and your instrument. And it's hours of practice and understanding with yourself, or, of course, with your teacher. But essentially, it's a lonely pastime, but exhilarating. So you have to be in love with your art, because that's it's a one-on-one in that respect. Tennis is the same. You're out there alone. It's not a team sport. Right. You're out there alone. You have to develop all the skills of self-survival, as well as self-improvement, which is motivated from yourself.
And you know, I was thinking other similarities, like tennis, there's so many parts of the game. You have to have a good serve, you have to have a good backhand, you have to have a forehand slice, a backhand slice. In tennis, in music, it's probably the same thing.
Indeed. You, depending on your profession in music, to a lesser or a greater degree. In my case, being a conductor, it's absolutely to a greater degree. I have to have a scope of knowledge and skill greater than any other role, if you like, in music, because I am managing, I'm the general manager of a musical ensemble, so I have to have working knowledge of just about every instrument in front of me. I have to be a master of certain instruments as well. I have to have personal managerial skills of managing people, of managing budgets. So I don't know if that's the equivalent to having a great backhand, forehand, topspin, slice, and the like. Then one has, as a conductor, has to have numerous and diverse skills to execute your responsibilities.
Well, you're out there by yourself. You're out there.
And you're out there yourself doing it. Yes. Right. Right.
Well, you also mentioned last time we spoke, which was very interesting, that in addition to being a conductor and being a performer, you also have educational initiatives that are you outreach to the community.
Indeed. Professional non-for-profit arts organizations like ours, whether it be a symphony orchestra, whether it be a ballet, whether it be an opera company, we need to be, yes, proponents of our art, but we also need to be searching to be ever more relevant to our community. And let's be honest, the fine arts are to a certain extent an acquired taste. So just performing might touch, you know, maybe 10–20% of the population of a community. So we have to make ourselves more relevant to expose ourselves, expose the art form to the community, but also use the raw materials that we have. Those raw materials, by the way, are our musicians, to serve the community in different ways, in more diverse ways. That's why we have what we are very proud of, a very dynamic education and outreach program. And I stress the two words there. There is an educational component to it, and there is an outreach component. Let me explain that. Education, that's almost self-explanatory. We're in the schools. We take our musicians into the schools. Particularly, we like to target schools that do not necessarily have opportunities to be exposed to music, whose children might not have instruments on a regular basis, who might not have instruction in the school at all, or actually instruction at home at all, but are cobbling together an elementary orchestra with the few funds that the school might have. We target these schools, bring in our professionals, give them extra private lessons, give them joint lessons, sit side by side with them and do concerts, and I go in and work with their orchestras. A classic example of that is we have an in-depth residency with the Newark Arts High, where we do exactly that. Under the auspices of the education element of our education and outreach program, that's an example of what we do. The outreach element to it, we are particularly excited about, in that manifests itself, yes, to a certain extent in finding underserved communities, but also finding unorthodox venues and institutions and situations to put ourselves in. For example, we have a program we're very, very proud of called Listening is Healing, whereby we take our musicians, who are especially trained in this manner, to hospitals, to institutions accommodating autistic children, to schools with that serve children with both cognitive and physical disabilities. And we give presentations to them, interactive, one-on-one, joint presentations, and they respond in an extraordinary, unique way. They cannot appreciate or show their appreciation in a way that a very well-behaved audience at a concert hall might behave. But while we're performing, for example, they shout, they clap, they scream, they move their bodies, and to see this positive reaction from these kids is a truly moving experience. And getting them to respond and communicate with the outside world in the only way they know how, and for us to know that it's the music that's bringing that out in them, is an inspirational thing. So we do that again in Newark. We're at JFK Special Needs School. We're at Children's Hospital doing a program both in Morristown, both in Mountainside and in New Brunswick. That is a deeply moving experience. Another element of the Listening is Healing is that we send musicians up to Memorial Hospital, and specifically the Simon 5 Cancer Ward. And we take our musicians up onto the wards, and we perform in conjunction with their music therapist, play music to enhance either the rehabilitative or the palliative care process that is taking place up in that hospital. And that, again, is a truly inspirational exercise in a different way. That, of course, affects the patients there, but it also, there was a kind of an offshoot benefit that initially in designing the program I didn't think about. But once we were doing it up there, it manifested itself very clearly. Specifically that the caregivers, particularly in a situation like a cancer ward, is stressful.
Right.
It's burdensome for them, but in a very beautiful way, and that's the wrong word, burdensome, but it's a heavy weight on their shoulders. Right. They're caring for dying people, they're caring for people who are trying to get better from being very ill, and we were told by the nurses, by the administrative staff, and by the doctors of what a benefit it was to them, for us to be there playing soothing music at appropriate times, to let them let off steam themselves, and that would help renew their energy to then go back and care for the very sick people that they were caring for. So yes, we were doing this for the benefit of the patients there, and many of them expressed their thanks. It was also serving in a very special way, giving the caregivers strength to deliver their responsibilities. And I will say there was one other element as well, which was I experienced possibly one of the most moving moments in my musical career. There was someone in a ward who was in the process of passing away within minutes. And there was the family around them. And we were just playing some music, not actually in the room, but just around the corner, and it was wafting through into the bedroom where this was taking place. Whilst we were there playing, the person passed away. And the family just stood round the bed. There were about 4 of them, 5 of them. It must have been for about 10 minutes, just digesting the family, what had just happened with their family member, and living the experience in their own unique way. After that happened, I got one of the most moving letters from one of those family members who were there, saying how much it contributed to helping that moment take place. And my goodness, if I just got one response like that, this whole program was worth it. But in fact, I've got many, many varying thanks and positive responses for that particular aspect of our listening is healing. And not wanting to dwell on that specifically, but that's a classic example of how we can use our raw material, our forces, in an unconventional way to serve the community, other than simply doing concerts.
It's interesting because the music is a way of communicating, and the people you described, you help in a different type of communication.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily verbal, but the people, the children who are autistic, they take it on in a different way, and they react to it, and you could see their facial expressions.
Facial expressions, their physical expressions, they're moving their arms, they're clapping in inappropriate times, they're making noises at inappropriate times, but who cares?
Right.
That's their way of
Right.
saying, this means something to us.
Right, well, they're probably, I work with children and adults who have special needs, and I think when you can get through to them and communicate to them, they're very grateful to you, and that's a gift that you can give them that they'll always, that not everybody can do that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So that is partially the scope of what we do. We do our main concerts, we do our outreach, we do our education, and it's manifest in many, many different ways.
And can you tell the listeners when your next concert is and what that's all about?
Indeed. The weekend of March the 3rd and the 4th is a highly anticipated activity for the New Jersey Festival Orchestra, in that it is a presentation of our annual fully staged opera. The opera is Madame Butterfly. The operas don't get much more famous than that one. Of course, the story of an American who falls in love with a Japanese, but then circumstances don't pan out as planned, and it's a tragic story, but the music written by Puccini, possibly the most beautiful operatic music ever written, and we're staging it with beautiful Japanese costumes, with an orchestra, with some of the finest singers, American singers of national and in some cases international repute. And yeah, we're performing the whole opera, both in the Presbyterian Church in Westfield at 7 o'clock on Saturday, March the 3rd, I believe it is. And then on Sunday, March the 4th, at 3 o'clock at Drew University in their famed concert hall. So two performances back to back are, I say, national and international stars that are taking the major roles. Our tenor, who is taking the role of Pinkerton, the American sailor, has just come back from Covent Garden in London, and in fact, he sung the national anthem for in Wembley Stadium for the recent American football showcase that took place there in front of like 80,000 people. And he's Noah Stewart is his name. He's coming back to take the role of Pinkerton. Asako Tamura, who is a famed Japanese soprano, traveled all over the world. We're blessed, and I've worked with her before, but both with the Festival Orchestra and other companies. So we're blessed to have her come back to take the lead role of Madame Butterfly. And this is one of the more popular programs that we do, for good reason. It's dramatic, it's passionate, it's visually stimulating, and we encourage anyone who likes music of any form and drama and likes their heart to be broken while watching a movie or watching a show, they should come to this extraordinary presentation.
Like I said, I went to the one last year in May, and I really enjoyed it. So
Well,
I imagine this one will be just as good.
We hope it will. We think it will.
And I know that there's sponsors involved, and this doesn't all. There's a business end to it as well. You have an upcoming event as well in that.
We do
And-
actually. Indeed, there is a major business element to putting on concerts. They don't just happen magically, but most of the audience, most of our audience, and most of people who appreciate the fine arts and actually go to any kind of show, in a way they only see the tip of the iceberg with an organization, because the show is the manifestation of a massive amount of work of staff members, musicians who are preparing it, stage directors, stage crew, fundraisers, marketing people, all these diverse activities and groups of people to make the 2-hour show happen. But a 2-hour show might take 3 months in all to prepare properly. And one of the fundamental elements, of course, of a non-for-profit is fundraising. This is I'm going to tell you a factoid, if you like, of the music industry, in that for a professional organization like ours, maybe 30% of the income side of the budget is earned. What do I mean by that? I mean ticket sales, or a mug, or a t-shirt saying, "I love the New Jersey Festival Orchestra." If we sell tickets, or we sell these mugs, or whatever, it covers only 30% of our budget. So that leaves 70% to be raised somehow. Now in Europe, that is all subsidized by the government. But in this country, the government only maybe covers 10% of that. So 30% earned income, government throws in 10%. That means there's another 60% somehow to be raised to make a balanced budget. And that is all done through fundraising. And that, I think what I've just said is an astonishing fact to many people. So let me put this another way. A healthy professional arts organization like ours, a healthy one, is running at a 60% loss.
And you have an event coming up to
Right. So with
to
that
help
said,
to help with that.
With that said, an organization has to be funded through donations, and it's done through corporate support, it's done through individual donations, it's done through foundation support. Those three categories of support all come together to fill that gap of 50–60%. To your point, we have two major events, fundraiser events coming up, and they're both quite well known within our communities. One is our Tour of Notable Homes, the New Jersey Festival Orchestra's Tour of Notable Homes. That is on Saturday, May the 12th this year, and that's where 5 houses from the community sometimes further afield than Westfield, but usually in Westfield, they are opened up to the general public to be shown, and we identify these fantastic homes, and hundreds and hundreds of people come and have a nice day walking around Westfield, visiting these homes, and the monies that are raised from the ticket sales and the raffles raise a significant amount of money for the symphony to start covering that 60% gap. The other major fundraiser we have is our annual gala, which I believe is held in late April. Might be the 28th, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that. But it's at the end of April, and it's a gala, it's a black tie gala at Shakamaxon.
Oh.
And it's a dinner dance, you get fed very well, have a wonderful dance, and a few presentations again from the symphony. But it's, and this raises significant amounts of money for us to allow us not only to put on the concerts we do, but in particular, we have expanded our outreach and education programs, and we are passionate about that, both about its fundraising and its implementation.
Well, we have to start wrapping up here. And last year you told me that you were with one of my favorite comedians, and you said you've been. Is there? Can you tell us that?
Yes. Well, earlier on in our chat, I mentioned the diverse types of programs we do. And as I sometimes jokingly say, we do not just do overture, concerto, dead German. We do all sorts of different types of programs. And within the sphere of our POPs presentations, we perform movie music, we perform Broadway shows, but we also collaborate with people who you wouldn't necessarily immediately think of associating themselves with a symphony orchestra. Specifically, last year, we performed with the famed comedian Bob Newhart. I'm very proud to say that I think we did one of the last shows before he passed away at age 90-something with Don Rickles. We also have performed with Joan Rivers, who also passed away not too long ago, but in about 5-6 years ago, we did work with her. And these are fun events. We play to walk them on, we play to walk them off, we do little kind of cameos to give them a rest. But the experience of this with these artists, all three, by the way, are very fine musicians. Some of them sung with the orchestra, and the experience of doing that is not only hilarious because they were hilarious, but enlightening. They were all concert performers, consummate performers, and real pros. And there was with Bob Newhart. That he did a 2-hour show, and I heard only respectable words coming out of his mouth with hardly one curse or swear word. Conversely, with Don Rickles, I heard maybe 1 or 2 regular words, the rest being curse or funny, possibly bleepable words.
And that was when he was in his 90s.
And that was only in his 90s. He was very, very feisty.
That was the comedian I was referring to, and he was growing up. I mean, do you have any funny story? Did you talk to him? Did you see him backstage? Is there?
Well, yes. Well, I remember there was a funny story. He was in his when we performed with him. He was in his 90s. And the show was to start at 8 o'clock. And he was in his dressing room, and it came to 10 past 8, and the audience was all there waiting, and we thought, well, he needs a little extra time to get ready. The time came to 15 past, and the audience was starting to get a little restless. The stage manager had come on, knocked on the door, and said, "Whenever you're ready, Don." And then at 25 past 8, 25 minutes after the show came, the stage manager came and knocked on the door of his dressing room and said, Mr. Rickles, I really think we need to start. And all we heard coming out said, I'll be out in 40. And then he came out about 1 minute later. But but he was a great. They were all wonderful.
And I try to ask this question to all the guests. Is there a favorite place you have in Westfield that you like to go out? Pizza or anything?
Oh, it's a hard thing to say, and a careful thing for me to say, because as an ambassador for one of the most revered institutions in Westfield, the New Jersey Festival Orchestra, I don't want to show too many favoritisms with regards to eating or drinking places, but look. We are blessed in Westfield by having so many great options to relax. I will say, though, I particularly enjoy the parks that we have. And you know that I spend a lot of time down in Tamaqua Park with my kids training for their tennis. That's where we've seen each other before on many occasions with your wonderful tennis daughters as players as well. But we are blessed to have places like Tamaqua and Mindawaskin and some of the other parks in Westfield. We're blessed to have a wonderful downtown offering numerous places to eat and to drink, and the environment. I just enjoy and celebrate this environment that we have in Westfield, and that I've been living. Me and my wife and my kids have been living in now for 8 years. And just Westfield itself is one of my favorite places in New Jersey. That's what I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's a good answer. I was just thinking, almost every podcast, Tamaqua guest virtually always brings up Tamaqua.
Really?
In some way, maybe I bring it up because it's like my favorite place
Right,
in
you
Westfield.
live there, don't you?
Yes. But I agree, the parks are great. I enjoy the town myself as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming today for your second visit, and hopefully you'll come back for a third or fourth.
I would love that, Mike.
Okay, thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.